Hey guys, off the mic sports network here. I've got to follow up on a video that I did recently about the NBA Coach of the Year conversation has gotten really interesting, even though we're not even at the end of February. The season's still a month away from being over. And yet we're talking about the Coach of the Year already because, granted, and I've said this and I've given them credit, the Detroit Pistons, to me, are one of the great stories in the NBA this season. Frankly, probably the best, considering they were one of the worst teams in basketball a year ago. And here they are, potentially in position to be the 4 seed. But can we stop with this whole narrative of like, oh, it's harder to get a team from being in the worst position in the NBA to where they are than what Kenny Atkinson is doing in Cleveland? Because I think people are just starting to disrespect the Cavs and Kenny Atkinson for what has been done this season. And you know what? Fine. If you want to underestimate this team, fine. If you want to underestimate Kenny Atkinson as a coach, go ahead. But I continue to just poke holes in people's logic in terms of, okay, you want JB Bickerstaff to win. Okay, they're the 4 seed. I also looked at the numbers. There hasn't been a coach in the last 25 years with less than 41 wins to win the Coach of the Year. That was Doc Rivers in 99 2000. So first of all, it's not going to happen. The NBA and the people who vote for this award are going to give it to Kenny Atkinson because the Cavs are going to finish with one of the best records in the NBA by the end of the season, health permitting, obviously. But the thing that drives me crazy is people are acting like the Cleveland Cavaliers coming into this season were anything more than a fringe title contender. Yes, I understand that they went to the second round of the playoffs and won a game against Boston and took them to 5 games. And yes, they were hurt at the end of that season. But if you actually know basketball and we're following and looking at and I have the odds in front of me right now before the season. If you actually sat down and you actually were avidly following the NBA and you wanted to tell me that the Cavs were one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference heading into this season, you are delusional. You are delusional because Boston was clearly ahead of them. New York the Knicks had just made a couple of massive trades for Mikal Bridges and for Karl Anthony Towns. So everybody was on the Knicks bandwagon because the Knicks got screwed. The Indiana Pacers, who beat the Knicks and went to the conference finals that year, they were thought to be. Milwaukee still has Giannis and Dame. They had Chris Middleton and traded him away, so let's leave that out of the equation. I mean, Miami, I was looking at the odds prior to the season. The Miami Heat actually had better odds than the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yes, I understand that they had Donovan Mitchell, but there was questions about how this was going to work. They didn't make any significant roster changes until they made the trade for DeAndre Hunter. Yes, health obviously helped in this perspective, but the Cavs are outscoring teams by more than 10 a game. They're scoring almost 123 points a game. That is just not by accident. Yes, talent is there, but it is very hard in any sport to take what was a seemingly considered okay to good team, fringe contender, and make them the best fucking team in basketball. Guys, if you think that the Cleveland Cavaliers, if you thought before the season, I'm a Cavs fan. I didn't even think the Cavs were going to be ahead of Boston at this point in the season. I thought maybe they could, give them a little bit of a series and maybe go 5-6 games if they matched up. I didn't think that they could realistically go toe-to-toe with the Boston Celtics, and they'll have a chance on Friday night to see if they can beat them. Everybody was like, the only 2 teams that really have a shot are the only 2 teams that really would consider ahead of the Cleveland Cavaliers, or at least on par with the Cavs, are Oklahoma City and the Boston Celtics. But let me read you the odds of all of the teams ahead of the season, according to Action Network, that had better odds to win the NBA championship than the Cleveland Cavaliers. Boston, favorite to win it because, they're the NBA champion. Oklahoma City, okay. New York Knicks, okay. Philadelphia, I didn't even mention that. Philadelphia re-signed Joel Embiid and made a huge free agency splash in Paul George. It just turned out to be a complete disaster. But you cannot tell me that you had the Cavs ahead of the Philadelphia 76ers before the season. You're delusional. Minnesota. Minnesota, by the way, and let me actually check the numbers, the date of when I'm reading this article. So this was in late October. This was right before the season. So you had the Minnesota Timberwolves, which that's high considering they traded away Karl Anthony Towns ahead of the season. Denver Nuggets, former NBA champion, cool. Dallas Mavericks, we know what happened with them. Milwaukee Bucks. The Phoenix Suns, remember them? And remember how crazy everybody was about the Phoenix Suns? Everybody before the season was crazy about them. The Lakers. This is before the Luka trade. The Memphis Grizzlies, who were coming off one of their worst seasons in the last handful of years, they had better odds. Granted, Memphis has had a really good season. The Warriors, who lost Klay Thompson, and they were reshuffling their roster, and they made a significant trade for Jimmy Butler. Speaking of Jimmy Butler, the Miami Heat had better odds. So let me count this for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 teams had projected better betting odds, according to the Action Network, than the Cleveland Cavaliers. If your argument to me is people thought that the Cavs were going to be a contender and that should be an indictment on Kenny Atkinson and should be like, a reason why Kenny Atkinson shouldn't win Coach of the Year, that is such a bogus argument. What Kenny Atkinson has done with this team is taken a really solid basketball team with a really talented roster and made them the best team in basketball. To me, that warrants being Coach of the Year. No disrespect whatsoever to JB Bickerstaff. It is an amazing story what he has done with the Detroit Pistons. But considering the way expectations are set, yes, I understand that they were at the literal bottom of the NBA and to get up to where they are. But you see these stories almost every year in the NBA. Okay? You do not see a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers with the exact same roster that they had last year about to surpass their win total in the month of February, being the literal best team in basketball and being considered one of the few teams in the NBA that has a legitimate shot at knocking off the Boston Celtics. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? It's at a certain point, it's going to start becoming disrespectful. And I hope that the Cavs and Kenny Atkinson take it personally and just start literally beating the shit out of people, which is almost impossible considering they are already beating the literal shit out of people. Their averaging margin of defeat is almost 10 to 11 points a game. Keep doubting these guys. Come on. Like, I think it's really cool what the Detroit Pistons are doing this season. But that does not mean that JB Bickerstaff is the Coach of the Year in the NBA. And the fact that so many people are rallying behind this is really just kind of embarrassing. And then people trying to use, hey, we always thought the Cavs were supposed to be good. I was like, guys, I knew the Cavs were going to be good. But I had seen this iteration of this group run back so many times, and everybody was clamoring for roster changes. None of that happened. They ran it back with this whole team. They stuck to it, and they said, hey, the one change that we're going to make is head coach. And look at them now. They won their first 15 games to start the season, guys. They're on an 8-game winning streak now. They just beat a playoff team or a borderline playoff team by 40 points in their own building. Please stop it. Stop talking out of your asses and disrespecting who I think the guy who has been the best coach in basketball this year. Come on. Stop it. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.